welcome to the Tachiai Haru preview podcast. This time out, it's just Bruce and Josh. Hello, Josh. How you doing out there?
Konnichiwa, Bruce. Hello from sunny Los Angeles.
Well, hello from formerly tundra infested Texas. I'm kind of interested and excited because this Haru basho now marks 1 year since the COVID craziness began, and I think we all remember last Haru there was this eerie Osaka tournament with nobody in the stands and a couple of sort of different, never seen before rituals that happened, including all the rikishi lining up on each side of the doyo, and it was haunting and weird because you could hear everyone grunting and groaning, and it echoed in this empty hall. You were in Osaka, weren't you?
Yeah. It was an eerie Osaka city, you could say, because, by that point there were no more tourists. There's nobody coming in, at least at that point, from certain countries. And so just walking the streets, a lot of people weren't really sure at that point. Is it okay to go out? I mean, these are the early moments of this pandemic, which were kind of scary for everybody. And I had come at the back end of another trip and was kind of hoping to be able to see Sumo, obviously. And as you just mentioned, that didn't happen. But and that was the last time I was able to get to Japan. And it's interesting that you bring that up because I've seen just kind of looking around the net, Sumo forum and Reddit and stuff. And some people have actually said, what's happened with Tachiai over the course of the last year? And they said, why? We think, sometimes they're in Japan and they get to actually make content from Japan. And it's true. Yeah. We'd be over in Japan a lot. I know you were at the tournament just before that. And without us able to actually go to Japan, it means that we've got to conjure up moments like this, like we're doing right now, to be able to bring content to people,
Yeah, it kind of sucked some of the oxygen out of the sumo world and we'll get to the other half of why things are maybe a little bit more quiet on Tachiai than they used to be. But that's a good question. And to be completely honest, in my own personal world of endeavor, things got so incredibly busy is that I now have to put my work on hold in order to have any time for sumo. And I'm hoping that once this COVID nonsense is behind us, and please be behind us soon, I can go back to something a little bit closer to normal. But, COVID's really taken a big swipe at sumo. Last tournament, we had Hakuho himself out with an active case of COVID. And people I know personally who've contracted this nasty little disease have found themselves weeks and months later still struggling to have the kind of stamina and energy they did before they caught it. And I'm genuinely curious to see what kind of effect it may have on Hakuho. Now, granted, he's super genki, right? For a guy of his age to still be in a combat sport and still whip it on as hard as he does, if anyone can stand up and smack COVID around, it's probably Hakuho. But biology, virology, being what they are, I kind of don't want to know how this turns out, but I'm hoping it turns out well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you mentioned him, and you have to remember also it's, you have the guys at Kokonoi Bea, of course, they had a huge outbreak, including the stable master had a really tough time, the former Chiyo Tachiai, and over at Arashio Wakatakakage, of course, up in the upper Maegashira ranks. And so, you have those guys in addition to Hakuho, or how is it going to continue to affect them? And the other thing, at the moment that we're recording this, they haven't actually taken the tests yet that they're going to take before this basho. So, hopefully there's not more such cases like those guys for this to continue to bleed on into forthcoming tournaments. But who knows, in terms of the state of, Sekitori who have contracted this over the past several months or even currently, let's hope not, but, how that will continue to affect them and sumo for the rest of the year, if not further.
Well, Japan really has a looming crisis. I think there's no other way to put it with COVID, and that's the delayed Tokyo Olympics, now intended to be run this summer. And if they're going to keep that schedule, they need to begin to bring the foreign athletes into the country next month so that they can begin to train locally. And there's a lot of concern that maybe they're not quite ready for that. In addition, Sumo isn't doing regional tours. They aren't doing tournaments in remote locations. And that, I think, is going to, we know for a fact it's hurting the stables because they don't get to have Senshiraku parties. They don't get to have contact with the fans and raise money like they normally do. And I've just got to wonder, is Sumo getting into a bad spot?
It's going to be interesting to see how they come back from these moments. Just talking to some folks that we know, friends of the site over in Tokyo, the really intriguing thing is that, over the course of the last year, we've given the Sumo Association a lot of praise, and a lot of praise that they have been due, in fairness, for the fact that they've taken this really cautious approach, starting from, in the beginning, as you mentioned, the Osaka tournament last year, no spectators, and then gradually ramping up the amount of spectators that have been able to attend tournaments. But what we've been hearing is that they haven't even been able to sell out of those reduced capacities. And so we're hearing that spectators aren't going to be able to come into Japan to attend the Olympics, as you say. Even just being able to get athletes in is going to be a challenge. Then you also just have the stigma that's attached at the moment, and probably for the foreseeable future, as you referenced there, to people probably not wanting to attend live sporting events, full stop, right?
Yeah.
And so, when you talk about the challenge that they may have in terms of, their ability to bring in revenue, at a macro level as an organization, and then you look at the stables, as you're saying, and those folks rely on not just, the money aspect, but it's also things like being able to get donations from fans and, being able to engage those people, and you miss out on those opportunities when you're not able to get in front of people. And I think that has a little bit of a squeeze on day-to-day life. So let's hope that, everybody's got fresh rice in the stable going forward.
Talking about a squeeze on day-to-day life, let's touch on one of the other things that has sort of strangled Tachiai's access to sumo. And you wrote about it recently on the blog. It was a great post about the SNS ban that's more than a year old now. For fans who may not have known this, and what's fascinating to me is we continue to get new fans to sumo, new people coming to the site, new people learning about it. And there was an age before COVID, a while before COVID, where Rikishi had social media accounts. They were on Facebook, they were on Twitter, they were on Instagram, and there was all kinds of stuff that you would be able to consume, and it would allow people like us, a fan-run fan site, to have things to rally around. One of my favorites, of course, is Amakaze would have a daily post of a video of him eating something. Right now, if you've not been to Japan or follow Japanese culture, there is a whole genre of television shows that's nothing but people eating things and saying how delicious they are. Well, I vote that when Amakaze, in the fullness of his career, actually retires, he needs to be probably a host of such shows, because I've never seen anyone get so animated eating anything in my life. And trust me, he'll eat anything. But you talked about this ban on social media, and it really has strangled our ability to connect with the Rikishi.
Yeah, I have to say the reaction from people on the site was pretty amusing, because there were obviously a lot of people who disagreed, which is cool. It's unrealistic, I think, that if you're doing any kind of an opinion, that everyone's going to agree all the time.
Oh, of course. Sumo fans aren't opinionated at all.
Right? No, definitely not. But I think the goal was really to challenge the idea of what is the point of the ban at this point, Yeah. And I think personally, now that we were just talking about, we're into year 2 of the pandemic. A lot of super fans miss the relationship that they're able to have, and also they're able to develop with Rikishi. And I think it does impact how people interact with sumo, both inside and outside of Japan. And I think, the stables and the association have taken some steps to try and mitigate that, but they're small little nuggets, the posts they do, hey, check out how you, break into mawashi, or here's what we're eating at the stable this week, or whatever. And I think, maybe what was missed by, I think, some of the folks who commented, I'm not advocating that all Rikishi must be on social media. That's not the point.
Silly.
Yeah, it's not a helpful medium for a lot of people. A lot of people that we encounter in our day-to-day life probably shouldn't be on social media. The same is obviously true of someone like perhaps Abi, you know what I mean, as in evidence. But I think, some people are prepared for the responsibility. Whether you're an athlete or you work in an office, there are repercussions for bad behavior, you know what I mean? So within sumo, the repercussions for bad behavior are always very strict and stronger than in any other sports league, certainly in terms of, what's going to come back. So what I do think is it should be their choice. And I think it's pretty easy to implement an education system and a disciplinary system around that at the sumo school. And, you watch tournament, whether you watch on NHK or you watch at BIMA, these guys still talk to the media. Like, they're not totally monastic. So I think it's a bit weird that you can talk to, for example, like Asahi Shimbun or whoever, and let them parse your words, but not be able to do it yourself. And the other element here will say, well, it's not actually that many people who are super fans. And that's true. But as you were talking about it a couple minutes ago, the super fans are the people who literally power the sport, from bottom feeders like us, on our site, to people who are in the Koen Kai and Tanimachi and so on and so forth. So it's worth bearing in mind that at all levels, all of those people, including us, have had less access to Rikishi over these last couple of years.
And what's fascinating to me is to witness that it's not just Tachiai who's had to dial back the intensity, but the Japanese language super fans on Twitter and on Instagram have had to as well. I don't know if it's a distraction because you've got this COVID thing looming over you, or you're not interacting with the athletes nearly as much. And the other thing that really strikes me as corrosive about this whole thing is that we are retiring a lot of the old guard now. And we have a new crop of Rikishi that are going to be in the dominant position. And they need to build a fan cadre. They really do, in order to support them, in order to drive them forward, because that's the way these sports work. And with the Sumo Association limiting their ability to access the fandom and to grow the base of sumo, I think it's just really corrosive.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, one of the comments that I made back on the site was, this is me kind of coming at it maybe a little bit with my marketing hat on, looking at it from the day-to-day job. But, we talk a lot about guys like Hokuseiho, right? And Hakuho Recruit and Miyagi no Beya. And, again, you look at the fact that if Hakuho was posting like maybe we would be expecting, and Ishiura, who is someone who I was a massive fan of on social media, and I wouldn't be the fan of Ishiura that I am without what he posts on social media, because it's more in line with the interests that I have in my day-to-day life. So if I had access to someone like Hokuseiho, through the Rikishi that I already followed in the same stable, then by the time that someone like him gets up to Juryo and becomes a Sekitori, and the Sumo Association is producing merchandise, whether it's the little Nobori flags or it's the pens or the badges or whatever, they make all the stuff for every single guy that gets up to the salary ranks. Then you've got a fan already who follows people in the same stable and is ready to consume that merchandise and consume that content. And, as you say, in a couple years, Ishiuras of the world and certainly the Hakuhos of the world aren't going to be around. And so you missing that opportunity to build up that fan base for the same guy in the new stable,
Yep. No, I think excellent points all, Josh. It really is well past time to lift that ban. I mean, it's not like you're going to see videos of these guys going to hostess clubs at this point, because most of them are sequestered in the stable. What you may get is a bunch of hardcore training, and here's what we're doing in the stable, and some of the shenanigans that they used to post when everyone was taking their post-lunch nap, which I thought was, it's a great slice of life. It really is. Yeah. But I think, to play off what we were just talking about, I think we really are, and you mentioned this to me earlier via chat, I think we're entering the apex, or at least the deflection point in the transitional era. It looks like we're at least going to get Kakuryu to start, right? He's stated that he's in and he's going to do it, and that he's healthy enough to at least give it a shot. We all know that for both Yokozuna, it is come in and fight 15 days or Intai. Both of them are safe. in the Intai scenario. They're both now have Japanese citizenship. They both have a path to Oyakata, and they're both going to have a very long and happy life, helping to influence the future of sumo, which makes me really happy. But let's talk a little bit about this transition period. Tachiai has been talking about it now for at least 3 years, and boy, did we catch hell when we first uncorked this bottle of goodness. But the world certainly did seem to follow our plan, didn't it? And I can't say that I'm overjoyed to see all of these wonderful Rikishi getting towards the end of their careers, but that's the way it goes. And we've got a whole new crop of great people. But I'll take a look at some of the old timers who are fading. We have Torashoryu, who just a year ago, plus N change, won the Yusho. Well, he's back in Juryo now. Ishira's down there. Enho's down there. And yes, I know that Enho's injured, and we hope he comes back. But, other long-serving people, Azumaru, Nishikigi, Shohozan, Kodayuki. I mean, Kodayuki's probably done. I mean, he's too banged up and beat up. I mean, his fighting spirit is great, but the body's just not able to do it. All of these people that if we teleported 10 years ago would be mainstays. They'd be the people that we are cheering for. We'd be yelling at our televisions to, throw them harder, sort of stuff. They're all sort of they're heading for the exits. Thoughts about this transition period, Josh?
Yeah, I'd say kind of the flip side of the transition period is, usually when we talk about the transition, you mentioned we started talking about this beginning, 2-3 years ago, and it was always focused on the big names retiring, the Goeidos, the Yokozuna, Koto Shogiku, who we've just lost kind of recently, Tochiozan, names like that. And now what you have is sort of that second tier veteran that's kind of been around for a while and starting to fade out. You mentioned Koto Yuki, Nishiki's down there. And of course it kind of makes the exception to the rule. There's like the Tamawashis and the Takarafujis who are increasingly looking like physical freaks for being the Iron Men that they are and being able to stay all the way up there because you watch Takarafuji with his style and you think he's 35, 35. He can do it for 3-4 more years. But, the thing is that you mentioned Tokushoryu. If we did see his final run in the top division, who knows? He could just as easily be back next tournament. But, you say for someone like him, what a way to finish that 2020 that he had, reaching his highest ever ranking and winning the Yusho and everything else. I think, some of these other guys will have had very good careers and maybe not necessarily have that kind of Cinderella story at the end. I don't know if Cinderella is really an apt comparison because I don't think she was like super old when it worked out for her, but but a lot of guys won't have had that story. But you do kind of think about Ikioi, who I love, and Nishikigi in the same stable, Kotayuki as we mentioned, and Azumaru, made it up to the top division last year and didn't really make too much of an impact, and now he's back down. And yeah, I think you're going to see more and more of these guys start to fade away. I think, the really interesting thing is that, there hasn't been an opportunity for people to have a proper retirement ceremony.
Yes. Giant logjam of Intai ceremonies.
You have this huge logjam right now, and I kind of wonder. I'm not suggesting that these guys are going to stay in the sport, until they're able to book a date at Kokugi-Con for a haircut. But it is really interesting the way that kind of slow fade is continuing to kind of pan out, but it's creating opportunities for a really exciting rush of newcomers.
Well, let's talk about someone who's bucking this trend, because you rattled off a few really good ones, but I want to pick out one that's especially glistening and glowing, and that's he's not that old, but it certainly looked like he was headed for the scrap heap, and that's our favorite kaiju Terunofuji, who is now probably just 9 or 10, I would say 10. He's got to get double digits. 10 wins away from returning to Ozeki after being down in Jonidan and basically being washed up and worthless. The guy racked up a series of Yushos in the lower divisions, including a back-to-back pair of Juryo Yushos. He is a monster now. His technique is tack sharp, and he seems incredibly disciplined. I just have to say, I think the big story is Terunofuji's run at Ozeki for this March. I don't know. Thoughts on that one?
I think it's possibly the biggest story in sumo in the past, I don't know how many years.
Since Kissa no Sato, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's a driven man on a mission. I think, as you say, he probably needs 10 because they like to see those Ozeki runs finished with an exclamation point. I think, the curious thing is I think it says a little bit more about the state of the other perennial Ozeki candidates, that he can suffer to the degree that he has and fall all the way down to the 5th division.
Oh, yeah.
And through sheer willpower, potentially become an Ozeki again. And I think the funny thing is when you hear it mentioned, when you listen to NHK, either in the little sound bites that they do or, in between basho and the previous show and whatever, no one's ever come all the way back from Jonidan to become an Ozeki again. No one's ever come back from Juryo to become an Ozeki again.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So it's the fact that he's, gone all the way down. And of course, there's also precedent for a lot of guys who, fall out from the Ozeki ranks tend to retire before they fall down to Juryo.
That's
so
right.
There is that. But, it's astonishing. And I think, the intriguing thing is that Terunofuji had a pretty brutal record as an Ozeki. But the crazy thing is, out of the current crop, it's actually kind of hard to see anybody who has more ability than him now, even at his sort of diminished best.
Yeah.
He's who knows what the ceiling is.
Oh my, what a subject. What a subject. The sumo quality from our current Ozeki is probably the subject of its own segment at some point. And Ozeki seems to be a very tough rank because a lot of really great Rikishi have suffered at that rank, and anyhow, let's talk about some other notables. I think first and foremost, I don't think it'd be too strong to refer to it as a Banzuke snub. The Yusho winner Daisho didn't get a slot created for him at Sekiwaki. He got a slot created for him at Komusubi. Now, the reaction to this ranged from sort of polite bemusement to outright hoots and hollers and threats to throw various bodily output in the direction of the Kokugi-kan.
Let's not do that right now.
Yeah, let's not do that.
The worst time in history.
Some fans were pretty darn animated over this subject, and it showed. So, I don't know, what's your thought on what happened with Daisho? I mean, you can include the Yusho that just took place in January.
It seems a bit ridiculous, looking at precedent. I think, you pointed out to me before the podcast, you sent me a note that said, we seem to be on a streak of minting new Ozeki, right? And I think I kind of look at this as I don't know if it was LK Sumo who said this on the site, but, this may be a situation where, they don't want it to be the start of an official Ozeki run, or so they put him at Sekiwake, and maybe that comes in the conversation, because at the current rate, we could see 0 Yokozuna and 10 Ozeki by next year, because none of the guys that get up there are able to make the next step and or fall back down and have to try and reclaim the rank again. And none of those guys would be Mitake Yumi, of course.
Or Takayasu.
Right. So, that's the thing. I can understand, if it's coming from the point of view of, let's set the bar a little higher to obtain the second highest rank, and let's make these guys work for it. And that's where it's coming from, then okay. But if it's just a situation where, he's at, Magashare 1, and he gets, 13 wins or whatever it is, and we're going to move him up one rank when there's clearly the precedent to move him up to Sekiwake. I don't know. That seems a little silly, but I'm not losing sleep over it.
I feel bad for the guy, but there is a tremendous clumping of high skill, high talent, high threat Rikishi in Komusubi and Sekiwaki ranks. So he's going to have his work cut out for it if he wants to fight his way up. And of course, if Terunofuji gets 10, then somebody's going to open a Sekiwaki slot at least. Yeah,
exactly.
But let's go on to another sort of long-suffering Sekiwaki who's currently an Ozeki and hopefully will stay that way. Is Takakeisho. Right, so I'd like to bring up something about Takakeisho, which is very interesting if true, right? Because you see all kinds of stuff printed in the Japanese sumo press, and you always go, what's going on? But there seems to be a bit of a lack of a better term, maybe a Jenny Craig moment going on in sumo, is that Mitake Yumi lost 10 kilograms. For those of us living in the backwards cap wearing United States, that's north of 20 pounds, right? You've got Takakeisho, who's down 17 kilograms. That's over 35 pounds that he's lost. He certainly needed it. But have these guys finally sort of gotten the message that maybe their bodies got more massive than they could properly support, do you think?
It's interesting because if you listen to him say it, it's like, no, I'm finding the right way for me to do sumo, and actually I've always been moving well, and I always feel like I'm showing up in the right.
Oh, baloney.
Yeah, that's the thing. So when you hear these guys, I mean, it's the classic story, and I remember when I started going over to Japan, and I went to see Keiko myself, and talking to people who would go to see Keiko for many years, and they'd say you don't get any information to actually talking to these guys or from anything that they say after Keiko, because they could be walking. I think Murray Johnson said this in an interview that we did on the site. It's like these guys could be walking off with a busted leg, and you'd be like, no, it's fine. My knee's fine. Like a totally screwed up leg or something. Like, so there's nothing that you can get out of that's actually usable. I think the interesting question with him and his injury now and everything else and losing weight is that if he is more mobile, which you don't necessarily associate him with always being the most mobile of Rikishi, but he actually is. So he really does rely on that.
So during the sort of last couple of months, I got into a bit of a funk where I was really missing sumo, and I started watching matches from 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. And if you go back to the smaller, faster, more lethal Takakeisho, dear Lord, that guy was mobile. That guy would surprise you. That guy would throw a stiff arm at you when you really didn't want to see it coming. And damn, I miss that guy. If he can come back, that's nothing but goodness.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, the deceptive thing about it is there's a lot of north and south movement with him. When we think about these stereotypically, very mobile Rikishi, we're thinking about the Enhos of the world and Tobizar and these guys who run around the dojo like maniacs. And the reality is that when we talk about the fitness of a Takakeisho and how that impacts his mobility, his ability to go forwards and backwards and change speeds and change gears and the rhythm, completely disrupt the rhythm of the match, relies on his ability to get around. And so, it's a different kind of mobility than we necessarily associate with someone like a Tobizaru or even a Takanosho, right? So, I think, the thing is that he has the ability to go out there and get his 8 wins, right?
Yep.
But I think it comes down to how he's been handling himself in addition to the weight in the surroundings at the new Heya, that their new facility, and
it's his building, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
Talk about an odd situation.
Crazy.
I'm amused by it.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the crazy thing is you look at this and you go, well, even despite all of these problems that he has, I mean, Karaban probably got he's carrying the injury probably into the next tournament. We don't think he's gonna be fully fit. It wouldn't be totally unsurprising for him to be a Yusho challenger, right?
Right.
But then at the same time, we've also seen him come back too early in the past, struggle and hurt himself further. So the thing is with him, I think 10 wins this tournament, or no, I should say, I think 10 wins might be harder to come by in May if he were to have more problems in this tournament than it was for him to get his 10 wins last time that he tried to regain his rank successfully.
So you're sort of begging a few questions that I think I'd like to get into now.
Yeah.
First of all, let's go for some predictions and opinions. And by the way, folks, we always regret our predictions within a few hours of making them. So we're not going to talk about Yusho stuff, just about some things that we think. Josh, do you think that we're going to get both Yokozuna this time?
Yes. I mean, it's funny because you've asked this question the last
Four.
Four podcasts,
Four
right?
tournaments.
Four tournaments. And every time, Andy or I or both of us have said, like, yes, or we'll get one of them, and then we've got none of them for various reasons, obviously, some things that you can't control. But yeah, I mean, I think that this feels like the most, certainly from Kakuyu said he's in. It would be very surprising if Hakuho wasn't in, I think.
Yeah, his ego won't let him sit out if Big K's in, I would think.
I just think he's been away for too long now, and he won this tournament last year. And I think, this gets into a bigger thing, but I think you look through history, right? Even when it was clear that a Yokozuna's time was up, or, they came back from a layoff of several months, they always took that one last turn on the doyo.
Yep.
Certainly you look at the last 30 to 35 years, with the exception of folks that left for scandal or disciplinary reasons, that's always how it's played out. They've always had that one last shot. And I think, some folks kind of take the point of view that no one's really had the absence record of someone like a Kakuryu in that time. And it's true. He's only completed 8 of the last 22 tournaments, which is incredible. And that's a strong enough sample size, I think, 22 tournaments, to say, okay, time's probably up here. But, a big part of that time was waiting for his citizenship issue to be resolved, so that he could continue in the sport as a coach. And it's interesting. I don't know if you saw this. There was an article in the Asahi Shimbun. I don't know if it was that recent, maybe within the last few months. And they said they're looking into now, the association's looking into now whether or not those rules should be modified so that we don't have this question that you're asking right now, right? Because here's the analogy that was made, was that, yes, to become a coach, to leave the life of an active rikishi and actually raise deshi in your own right, the coach must be able to understand how to teach the history and the traditions of the sport. And so, now, of course, we require that people take on Japanese citizenship. But how would Japanese people feel if, for example, Ichiro Suzuki, a baseball superstar, was required to take American citizenship in order to become a Major League Baseball coach, which would, of course, never happen. And, of course, it's apples to oranges.
America is a different place.
Yeah, it's apples to oranges. But, of course, people in Mongolia have had strong feelings about these retiring rikishi have to renounce their citizenship. And so I think if sumo can just sort out these administrative issues, then this whole question that we're debating right now over will Kakuryu would be avoided in the future.
So if we get both Yokozuna, and I agree that this is a pretty low probability event, but what happens if they show up and they're both pretty strong? What kind of freaking nightmare scenario chaos is that going to throw at people?
I think it's bad news for anybody who was hoping that we'd have a new Yokozuna anytime soon. To start with, I mean, it's funny because, every time, there hasn't been any Ozeki Yusho apart from Takakeisho's in November in the last several years. But, for anybody hoping that one of these guys would go on a rope run, I mean, they've been just so inconsistent and they've had so many injury problems. And, the argument that's always made is that when the vacuum presents itself, always someone steps up and, takes that next step. And so I think, to your point, if these guys come back, if Hakuho and Kakuryu come back and they're actually pretty useful this time out, we have to remember their job is to compete at the highest level, and there's only so many wins to go around.
It's a zero-sum game, which is one of the interesting things about sumo. So what do you think the chances are that we'll get both Yokozuna into the second week? Because I think they both understand that if they pull out, it's time to put on the fancy kimono and do the very low bow with the microphones on the floor.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's tough to say. I mean, because you don't want to read anything into the joint keiko that obviously the association put on. And
it's very polite, of course. Yeah. You need to make sure that you're very polite at that. And
yes. Well, it's interesting though because as you say, the guys that Kaku faced, well, I guess he faced Kiribayama in the Heian, and he's done very well against him. And he did a little bit of work at the Keiko, but then Hakuho showed up at the Keiko and lost 10 matches to Onosho.
I know.
And then that begged the question of, what he might be able to do. So I'd say it's probably 50-50 that they both get into the second week.
Yeah.
If they both get into the second week, it's because they're both, competing at the top end.
I sure would love to see that happen. I'm always a fan of the heroes go out with guns blazing, and I would love to see them to do that. All right, so let me advance to the next tick. Do you think that Takakeisho can clear Kataban?
Yes, I think he does. I think as I was kind of referring to a little bit ago, I think in a way he kind of has to because of the crunch that's kind of coming in that lower Sanyaku and upper Maegashira ranks. And it will be harder for him in May to get 10 wins, I think, than it was the last time that he lost his Ozeki rank. And so I do think he has enough about him to get 8. And it's just the thing with him is it's with a lot of these guys is, we can think he's totally crocked and he shows up and rattles off 12 wins, and he's in the Yusho race until the very end. At the same time, he could lose 5 of his first 7, and really give himself, a lot of it to do. But I think to your point, we talk about the fact that we're expecting the Yokozuna to be there. That means we're also expecting that the second week is going to be a lot harder for the Ozeki than it has been in the past. And so that means, we're going to be able to see what kind of Takakeisho we can expect to get within the first 3 or 4 days. Because if he comes out of the blocks, even 3-2 or 2-3, 3-3, then he's in a lot of trouble. He's
going to be in tough shape. Okay, so let's raise the stakes. We're getting closer to our ultimate regrettable prediction. Who do you think, Josh, is going to be in contention into Act 3, the final 5 days of the tournament? Who do you think will be the names that will be rolling around in the leaderboard and being talked about as far as lifting the big red fish?
I feel like I've got cataracts when it comes to sumo because it's kind of, it's like my vision is diminished right now. And I need, it's like, I don't know, I can see the shapes of who I think will be there. And
they're all round and kind of
right,
big.
Yeah, they're very round. It's like look into my crystal ball. The only name that I can pull out of this, I've got 5 groups. I have a Yokozuna, an Ozeki 1, Terunofuji. I think someone else from that Joy-Jin kind of group.
So let me throw a name out, and it's going to be a howler, right? But I have this weird sort of, and I'm putting on my sort of Andy disguise now, okay? So I've got a sort of hunch that maybe Kota Nawaka is going to have a breakout tournament.
I don't think that's so crazy. I don't think that's if the Andy prediction would be Hide no Umi. Top to Maegashira 14 or whatever he is. I think that. Sorry, Andy.
How did young Kota Nawaka become the Higashira for such a well-established stable?
Well, I think it doesn't hurt when the guy who was the top last tournament turned in whatever it was, a 3-12 or a 2-13 or whatever it was, to kind of give you that opportunity. But the two of them, Kota Nawaka and Kota Shoho, were so hyped from their entry into the sport. And Kota Nawaka, his dad's the stable master. Yep. Great career in his own right. His grandpa was the Yokozuna and the founder of the stable. Yep. Kota Zakura. So, the lineage is there, the pedigree is there. I think he's got a very interesting shape.
It is most unusual, but if he can make use of it, fine.
Yeah, but the thing is that he is technically very gifted, and I think one of the things that has been missing from a lot of these very hyped prospects who have reached the top division in the past few years, that is not missing from him, is that we've seen these guys come up to the top division. I even include Hoshoryu in this, where they're very, very skilled when it comes to belt work, or they're very, very skilled when it comes to Oshizumo, but they're not very skilled at both things. And I think I'm not saying that Kota Noaka arrived in the top division fully formed, because he didn't. Yeah. And he has been improving, and he's had setbacks and he's had injury problems, but he's also getting better at all those things. And I think, without wishing to go on a limb and say Kota Noaka is going to be the next Yokozuna, blah, blah, blah. The point is that, when we talk about the Asanoyamas of the world, you reach Ozeki, and he's very, very good at a few things, but he's very susceptible to Oshizumo. And you look at Takakeisho, who is fantastic at pushing and thrusting, and a variety of skills that surround that genre. But he's not a belt guy. And I think that to see someone like a Kota Noaka come up, who ostensibly could have a lot of the tools that you need to succeed at the highest level, it's a good thing. But he's never fought, consistently in the upper echelons of the division yet. Yep. And so, as we saw with Koto Shoho, who I think also is going to have a huge future, he's someone who could get absolutely wrecked when he gets up there. But I would love to see him be a challenger. I think it would be good for the sport.
Yep, I think so too. All right, so let's move on to the final round, and I'll go first this time. Let's talk about who we think may take home the hardware. And I have to say, one of the names you mentioned in the sort of Act 3, the final 5 days, is, believe it or not, my favorite, and that is Terunofuji, because I think he is going to accelerate through the finish. And it comes with one caveat. The caveat is Terunofuji for the cup, only if Hakuho is out by day 12. Otherwise, I got to go with the boss. Because I can't imagine a man who has been that dominant in the sport with that big of an ego wanting anything other than his final tournament, if it is his final tournament, and I'm sure if he wins it won't be, because I'm going to do it again, being nothing short of another Yusho. But that's me putting it on the line. Josh, what do you want to regret 15 days from now?
I want to regret nothing in any facet of life. The interesting stat, I don't know if I saw this on, it was Twitter, if it was Haru, or it was a Sumo forum person or somewhere, was that we know that the last 6 Hatsubasho winners have all been first-time winners. Yep. The last 6 Haru Basho winners have all been Yokozuna. And so that's very intriguing. And so the question is, or the last 5, whatever it is, whatever followed the first-time winners, it was always a Yokozuna. So it's interesting. If we're staying true to form, then I agree. Then I think it's Hakuho, right? Because I don't think it's Kakuryu. I'm just going out on a limb.
Yeah, I think so too.
So at the same time, there is this part of me that feels like it's a little foolish after the last 8 months that we've seen to be like, let's tip a Yokozuna winner after these guys have never showed up. And to your point, we don't even know what condition Hakuho is going to be in after the coronavirus. So I think that Terunofuji winning the cup would be a huge statement. And so I think, since nothing is likely anymore in this world as we know it, I think it's not what I predict we will see, but it's what I would like most to see is Terunofuji winning the Emperor's Cup.
Okay, so we've got 2 for the Kaiju taking home the hardware. And I think we'll wrap it there. Josh, thanks for spending the time, and thanks all of you for watching us. We appreciate the fans very much. And remember, everyone, for Sumo, it's Tachiai.